Hello, this is Dr. Marsden, and I thought I'd walk through this poem by Anne Stevenson. It's called "The Victory." So we'll just run through it sort of step by step, and then we'll use it to talk a little bit about maybe theme and diction and tone. So first, when you're going to take a close look at a poem, I think it helps to read it out loud. That'll help us catch any sound effects that are going on. So let me go through it once, and then we'll start looking at it a little bit closer. The Victory. I thought you were my victory, though you cut me like a knife when I brought you out of my body into your life. Tiny antagonist, gory, blue as a bruise, the stains of your cloud of glory bled from my veins. How can you dare, blind thing, blank insect eyes? You barb the air. You sting with bladed cries. Snail, scary knot of desires, hungry snarl, small sun. Why do I have to love you? How have you won? Okay, so you listen to it, and we can immediately figure some things out. We've got some rhymes that are pretty reliable here. So we've always got the second and fourth line of each. We've got groups of four here, so we'll call them quatrains. That's the word for groups of four in poetry. So we've got 2 and 4, stains, veins, eyes, cries, sun, one. Sometimes we have the first and third rhyming as well, so gory, glory, thing, and sting. But we don't always have that. So victory and body and desires and you don't rhyme. So we've got a pattern, some of which is predictable and some of which isn't. Okay. Then we want to kind of take a little look at what I'd call the narrative setup. Okay. Narrative setup is who's speaking and to whom. This one seems pretty clear. We've got an I, which is the poet's persona. The I in this case sounds autobiographical to me, so it sounds at least like it is the poet herself speaking. Though again, we can't necessarily know that. This might be a dramatic poem, in which case the I, the persona, is in a situation that the poet isn't in. Okay. We have a direct addressee, so we've got a you in there, and the you seems to be a child. Okay? And it seems as if the poem's being spoken shortly after birth. So we've got that set up. I thought you were my victory. And so we want to think, because the victory is the title of the poem, what that actually means. If we've got a struggle between two people, and then we've got a triumph, what does that mean? So I thought you were my victory, though you cut me like a knife when I brought you out of my body into your life. It seems like those pronouns here, the my and the your, seem to be a nice little hinge there. It seems like we're being asked to compare those two things. So from being a part of our speaker, the sun has become separate. Okay, so we've got that thing there. Cut me like a knife. That's almost a cliche, right? And that could be physical. Birth often has various kinds of physical trauma there. Or this could be some kind of emotional injury that's being done here. So we'll have to think about that a little bit. Tiny antagonist. Now that seems like a weird word for this. So an antagonist is a character that opposes the protagonist, the main character, the principal struggler in a work. So to call the baby the antagonist is to set up, again, kind of an opposition here. Gory. And if you've ever seen babies immediately after birth, that's a pretty good description. But something about the tone there is a little bit more extreme than I expect. Now, partially that's because in our society, there's kind of a taboo about mothers saying negative things about childbirth or about their children. That's kind of a really big one, as a matter of fact. So, by the way, now that we're starting to see that approach, that tone taken here, this probably fits as what's called a confessional poem. Confessional poems were pretty big in the late 60s and early 70s, and I think this one is going to be maybe in the late 70s was published. And in confessional poems, you'll have poets talking about their personal experience, but they tend to talk about it in ways that wouldn't ordinarily be celebrated by society. So you might talk about your childhood and emphasize some traumas that happened to you, or you might kind of delve into your own psychology a little bit, and that's kind of it's almost expected of poets now, but at the time that's kind of a big deal. So tiny antagonist, gory, blue as a bruise. Yeah, apparently when I was born, that was pretty much my color. So again, we're being accurate about the uncomfortable physicality of childbirth, I guess. Blue as a bruise. So we're associating him with injury again, like cut me like a knife, you're as blue as a bruise. The stains of your cloud of glory bled from my veins. Now, this sounds weird because it sounds to me like this is out of tone with the rest of the poem somehow. Now, I recognize this, but you might not. So again, all the stuff that you need to fully understand a poem is going to be called the poem's repertoire. So when I come into a poem and I don't have everything I need, and I suspect that there's a line in there that I don't fully understand, what I do is I go directly to Google. So here's my Google prompt. Clouds of glory. Okay, it sounds like we're already getting quite a bit of suggestion there. So this is going to be a phrase that probably isn't just a phrase that the poet picked up. And we'll find out. Let's not put that in quotes. And if we hunt down enough, we're going to figure out that it is going to come from, it'll probably take a little bit here. So let's try meaning. Okay. Trailing clouds of glory. Okay, this sounds like the right critter. And so let's try just that. And we've got a source. So this will be another poem. It's by William Wordsworth. He's a fairly famous poet. And if I want to figure out where it is, I can just Control F in our document here, and I'll just put in trailing. Hey, there we go. And here is, it turns out to be Wordsworth's talking about, well, he's looking back on his life and his childhood and some things in his childhood that he can't get back anymore. And in this stanza, our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar, not in entire forgetfulness, and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. Shades of the prison house begin to close upon the growing boy. So it's got the idea, and this is a romantic idea, that children are innocent, they're more spiritual than adults, because they haven't forgotten the stuff that happened before they were born. Okay, so that's a kind of a weird idea, but it's a commonplace, and Wordsworth's the guy who comes up with it. So trailing clouds of glory do we come from God who is our home. Let's compare that to the use here. The stains of your cloud of glory bled from my veins. So instead of the spiritual idea of where do babies come from, that Wordsworth's got, here we're rhyming glory with gory, and suitably because all of the baby comes out with blood, right? That the baby cost her somehow, that they've been connected, and that the birth is actually like an injury to the mother. How can you dare, blind thing, blank insect eyes? You barb the air, you sting with bladed cries. Okay, so blind thing, well, babies don't see super well when they're born, for sure. Blank insect eyes. That's weird. So by using a metaphor, by comparing the kid or the kid's eyes to insect's eyes, it's like it's an alien thing. Usually when we compare things to insects, we're not saying how cute they are or something. So you barb the air. You sting with bladed cries. So, by the way, we're taking audible things and we're making them into tactile things, right? So we're moving from the realm of hearing something. This is the first time she's heard the baby cry. You barb the air. If you've to me, and this is one of the reasons I don't have children, is babies' cries are absolutely impossible to ignore. Something that's barbed is like, well, think about it for a second. What usually has a barb on it? So it's like a hook, right? It's grabbing your attention. You sting with bladed cries. Evolutionarily, one of the reasons why we react so shockingly and kind of can't ignore babies' cries is because, well, if we could, we might, and then they wouldn't grow up, right? So you sting with bladed cries. Again, sting might go with insect. We've got bladed here, which is still back to what? Cut me like a knife, that kind of thing, bled from my veins. There seems to be some structuring metaphors that are going on here. Snail. Now, again, this is like what? Insect eyes, right? So this is a pretty good description of what very tiny babies might look like, especially before they've been cleaned up. At the same time, that's notedly more negative than most of the metaphors that we use about babies. Scary knot of desires. Oh, so again, what the persona is taking a look at this baby and suddenly feeling things that she feels like she doesn't have control over, right? Hungry snarl. Again, babies are proverbially hungry, so we've got that. And I guess one way to look at the kind of face that babies make, it could be a snarl. Again, that's kind of an animalistic metaphor. Small son. Okay, now she's putting it into the acceptable category. Small son. So there's maybe the first objective before it's been either a victory or an antagonist or a blind thing, and now she's finally naming it. Why do I have to love you? How have you won? So it starts with, I thought you were my victory, but by the end of it, she's talking more about how this child has beaten her, and how exactly has it beaten her? It's made her feel a particular way, So that little momentary resistance to that being pulled into that category, having that that evolutionarily appropriate response, is a little bit complicated, and so this poem seems to take a little bit more, a little bit more mixed, or maybe even accurate view of the emotions that go through this mother in particular's head. So again, what we're doing when we're reading, we're taking a look at all the language use. We're taking a look at the metaphors. We're taking a look at the implied metaphors. Things like bleeding and veins and cutting, barbing, bladed. And then we're also looking for a progress in the point of view through the poem. And in this one, we definitely have one from an initial assumption that turns out to be wrong to a different judgment at the end of the poem.